As I said, I'll be discussing how we can prepare today's network for tomorrow's challenge. And it's always, addressing the risks that you have, addressing the challenges that, is developing day over day in the security world is a race towards excellence, is a race towards being at your best. One side, the customers are doing it, the enterprises are doing it, and on the other side, the adversaries are doing it. And it's a race that I think will continue as long as the humanity exists. And as digitization and digital adoption increases, we will see more and more, attacks, more and more innovations, both on the vendor and technology side, as well on the adversary side. The topic about zero trust is a little bit, I would say, wide. I'll give you a brief, a brief comment about, or a brief background about zero trust. Zero trust as a concept was developed by a gentleman called John Kinderberg way back, I think in 2008 or 2009. It showed up in a report in Forrester where he was working as a consultant. Since then, John took many positions, but the latest of which he spent a good portion of the last 5 years in Palo Alto Networks. He just moved to his own consultancy. In Palo Alto, he worked closely with our CTO office to develop our product portfolio and implement his vision of zero trust into the product and technology strategy and acquisition strategy of Palo Alto Networks. So while zero trust is a common buzzword these days, I think very few companies had the privilege to work with John and have him directly impact the technology and the acquisition strategy that this company has. So a lot of what you're going to see in this presentation are actually slides developed by John himself, and as a corporate, we use them when we present to such audiences on the subject of zero trust. To start with, trust is a very dangerous, vulnerability. It's exploited all the time by malicious actors, and it doesn't only apply to information security. It applies in every aspect of our life. And at Palo Alto Networks, we truly believe in this statement. And we truly believe that the inherited trust model that we have in existing architectures is responsible in a big part of the breaches and the hacks that we see today. A large majority of companies have inherited the traditional perimeter model, where they have, from one side, the resources, the data center, the internet, and from the other side, the users or the corporate offices, and in between, they have some kind of perimeter security, a guard security, whether it's for the external resources or for the internal resources. While I can start to argue that this is not the best idea to start with, but this is an inherited model that came directly as an afterthought of connectivity as the communication boom started. But this traditional model, not only it introduces a lot of risks, but it also assumes a significant amount of implied trust. And for the people who are around, who started working with the old firewalls when they were introduced into the market, there was always a trust zone and a trust zone, and you by default assume that one side of your network is trusted and one side of your network is not trusted. While in today's networks, users move around, but not only that, but also you can look at people on the untrusted side compromising the identities of people on the trust side, and vice versa, and attacking the network either from within or from the outside. And back in the day, as I said, everyone was trusted implicitly. Everyone inside the network was getting trust based on location, not based on necessarily what he or she can access, but mainly based on their location and where they're trying to access the network from. And that model developed over time with multiple technologies, and multiple policies to allow trust into certain applications, but the networks got more and more complicated. And as I said, everyone of the corporate network was implicitly entrusted. While this is not the case today, as we all know, we especially after the COVID pandemic, we're all accessing the networks, our corporate resources from outside the traditional perimeter of where our laptops traditionally used to sit. With that, with just having a look at the back mirror to see how the networks have developed, it's important to notice that since 2018, in 2019, Verizon gave a breach report, and which is mainly focused on the US market, but they found out that 80% of the hacks of the data breaches were based on stolen passwords, and this continued to be one of the biggest factors in compromising data and compromising networks. And stolen passwords allows people either on the inside or on the outside to compromise existing identities and access resources based on what they have stolen. And it's not easy from a security perspective to put the right controls over that. You need some measures in place. You need some kind of analytics into your network that look at the behavioral patterns of users, the time that they access the network. Are you looking at simultaneous access? Is someone trying to access the network while he or she is on PTO? So there are a lot of helping measures that can be taken, but they are all an afterthought, to fix an existing problem with the way networks have been architected. So why do we need a different look at the networks? We need a different look because the perimeter has changed, right? Users and their devices are moving in and out all the time. Contractors, temporary workers, they jump into your network. They need temporary access to applications. They need, access at certain times of the day, on certain days, not on weekends. So this is a very dynamic part of the puzzle that we have. Another part of the puzzle is that applications are also moving out. If you look at where traditionally the applications sat, they sat in a data center. Then they started to get distributed across, a main data center and a disaster recovery data center, which you typically could load balance across. But then we had some hosting services where part of your applications were hosted with a hosting company. Then we moved into a private, public, and hybrid cloud environments. Think about, enterprises or even digital banks completely hosting their information on public cloud providers like AWS or GCP, rather on-prem data centers. SaaS applications, for example, like Google Drive, like Dropbox, can contain very sensitive data that users can upload into such public spaces without the traditional control measures that you have in place being able to filter what files are being uploaded on the SASE side. Also, not only that, a lot of devices are getting connected. The Internet of Things is booming. I think next year there is some of the reports expect in the next 2 years to have 5 billion plus devices connected to the internet. That introduces a huge security risk. If I'm not mistaken, a couple of weeks ago, I read about I think it was one of the casinos in Vegas that was compromised by hacking into an IoT or a connected thermostat in a fishing aquarium. So any connected device could represent a weak link in your network, and can be used by adversaries, by hackers, to get into your network. Also, as I said, partners, contractors, temporary employees that you might hire, people who are outsourced to your network, or that you're outsourcing somewhere else and you need to give them critical access. All of these need granular access to your data. They could be distributed over multiple branches or working from home. And all of this complicate the way we need to secure our networks, because the perimeter is evolving all the time, to the extent that it's literally those days with the pandemic, it has disappeared, right? So also, if you look at today's technology landscape, it's crazy. I mean, if you look at RSA in the US 10 years ago, you could at best, or maybe 20 years ago, you could at best find probably 150 vendors participating, right? Or at least in the early days of RSA. I think in the last RSA before the pandemic, which I attended, there was around 4,500 vendors over there, most of which are security oriented. So the problem doesn't become only what hackers can do, but it also becomes, how can you consume security? Consuming security is a bigger challenge than finding a solution to a security problem that you have. I'm sure every security problem out there, because it's based on human developed technologies, can be addressed by another niche human developed technology. It's not impossible to develop a niche product to any security challenge that anyone has, either before the fact or after the fact, right? The problem becomes that, if you see all these lines in front of you, whether with the identity access management vendors, with the endpoint security vendors, with the network security vendors, or with the cloud security vendors, they have to provide security solutions that can protect locations, users, devices, applications, IoT devices, and all of that represents a mesh that's, that exponentially complicates any network. And any single product does not equal or does not result in a complete security solution, and does not result in what we call a zero trust. So aligning boxes together and deploying them in a network doesn't achieve what customers want. And I've worked with a lot of customers, and as Dr. Isra mentioned, my experience goes into working with large enterprise and small enterprise networks. So I've spent a fair amount of my career working with service providers and looking at security as a service from that angle as well. Service providers get bombarded by all kinds of security vendors to offer security services for their customers. And the business model behind them, which involves deploying the technology and taking that service into the market to the end user, complicates the process to an extent. The service provider find it sometimes easier not to go into such technologies than offer these technologies to their customers. So as I said, consuming and deploying and putting a framework that allows you to utilize the technologies that you're acquiring to the maximum gets also in the way of getting the best out of the security deployments that you have. So we have to rethink the architecture, and we have to rethink the security. From an architecture perspective, historically, all the security was based on, on the network, on a networking approach. I mean, again, a lot of security was glued on routers or was glued on switches, because the basic underlying fundamental of information technology was connectivity. And connectivity enabled business, and security was always an afterthought. But in the new requirements, where from an architecture perspective, we're looking at context-based connectivity, cloud-hosted SaaS, prevention, takes a priority in the mindset of CTOs and of CISOs, then we need to relook at the architecture we have. We also need to rethink the security and look at the security requirements that allow us to offer and enable our business. So from a security perspective, we need complete visibility into all the traffic that is across the network. And to do that, our sensors, our equipment have to be in the right place. You cannot monitor and have complete visibility into your traffic if you are not in line of the traffic path, or at least receiving a copy of the traffic. And I would argue if you're receiving a copy and you find some malicious activity going, you might be too late to stop an attack. But in theory, you need access to all the traffic with the ability to get granular visibility and control at an application level. After that, you need to use context to set dynamic policies. You need to be able to create segmenting and enforcing your policies, not based on locations, not based on time, not only based on users, but also based on applications, and a combination of all the above. What's also important is the scalability by which you can automate and integrate and complete your threat prevention approach. As you can go online now and buy attack tools for peanuts. The power that's at the disposal of today's hackers cannot be fought in a traditional way, cannot be stopped by human resources only. You need to be able to utilize artificial intelligence, machine learning, automation to be able to stop the attacks that are being driven against you through machines. That's why we believe zero trust is strategic. Zero trust is strategic for the following reasons. First, if you look at what we want to achieve based on what I have presented so far, our grand strategy, which should give us an ultimate goal, right? We need to put a grand strategy with an ultimate goal. And under that, it should be based on a strategy that was triggered by a big idea. And I'll give more context into these arrows that you see in front of you. Our tactics will allow us to implement our big ideas. There are things we use to implement the big ideas. And finally, our operations is the way we use our technology. And I'll map that into the zero trust approach along with our ultimate goal. So the ultimate goal, the grand strategy of any digitally enabled business is to do business. And to do business, it means breaches, data breaches, and attacks should be stopped. The big idea that I'm discussing and I'm presenting to you today is the concept of zero trust. And to get into zero trust, you need certain tools, certain technologies, which I will cover later in the presentation. But it's also important how you use them, how you utilize them. And the platform and the flexible policies and the abilities to develop and scale policies across your network consistently is as key to protecting yourself as the technology that you acquire is. If you acquire the best technology in the world and you don't have the right mechanism to scale it, to automate it, and to keep it up to date, then eventually your grand strategy, your ultimate goal will not be achieved. So, this is the way we see zero trust is the security strategy, designed to prevent breaches. And it's based on an approach that completely eliminates the trust in the digital world. We assume everyone is not trusted. Everyone, users, devices, applications across all locations should not be trusted. Even two virtual machines sitting on the same server in the same physical location in a locked room in your data center should not be trusted, because you never know who has gained access or who could gain access into your infrastructure. Some of the ransomware that we've seen specifically in this part of the world, over the last 4 years, I would say, some of these ransomware could stay dormant in a network for 6 to 9 months before they take any action. So it's not a simple approach, and you need to assume that everyone is an enemy until proven otherwise when it comes to consuming your data. So let's look at the zero trust security from a different angle. Sorry. It should cover all your users and all your devices. It should be applicable to all locations, no matter where the users are sitting. It should have access control to any application, as I said, any device, and it should be applied everywhere. But most importantly, it should be applied consistently. As I said, the topic is a little bit complicated to squeeze into the time I have, but many data breach reports show on top of what I've showed earlier, that the report that Verizon showed in 2019, around 80% of breaches related to compromised password. Around 93%, if my memory serves me well, from a report in 2020, mentions that 93% of the hacks or of the data breaches in the market relate eventually to a human error. And human errors can be minimized by automation and can be minimized by consistency. If you don't have to reinvent the wheel, if you don't have to redevelop your security policies for every part of your network, for every box that you have, you will be able to have a unique and consistent build policy across all your network that allows you to verify how it's working one time for all your network, unless instead of going and trying to verify it and make it work multiple times across multiple areas of your network. And as I said, it shouldn't only look at data on-prem, it should look at SaaS applications, it should look at enterprise applications, it should look end-to-end across all the applications that you have. So let's now look at some of the design concepts that allow us to get to where we need to get. The zero trust design concept starts with business. So, what we eventually want is to focus on the business. We want to enable what the business needs to accomplish. In many cases, and I've seen it across multiple customers in my career, multiple enterprises, service providers, the security teams and the network teams are so focused on the technology itself that they don't map the requirement to the business. And in many cases, security comes, as an afterthought, low on the agenda, and it has historically been seen as a business inhibitor. So we need to focus on business outcomes. Next, we need to approach the design from inside and not the other way, and then move outside. We have to start with the most critical assets, and I have later in the slide some visualization that would help you, better, visualize what I'm saying. We need to start with the most critical assets, with our data, with our application, with our services, and then move to the less critical, assets in our network. The next thing we need to do after starting by protecting the most critical resources and investing the best we have from a talent, from a technology, from a resources, from financials on protecting our most critical resources, we need to determine who, what needs access. And then we have to enforce that with a policy. And that's why the flexibility of your platform, of the infrastructure you have to absorb the policy and distribute it consistently is very critical to the way you have to operate and to the way you can protect your assets. And finally, you have to be able to inspect and log all traffic. And on this part, and as I said, the time doesn't serve me well to cover this in details, but historically speaking, logs have been seen as an overhead. There was many ways that SOC operators, that network admins, security admins tried to filter logs and identify the most critical ones to look at because they couldn't scale. But with a lot of the machine learning / artificial intelligence that we have today across what we call our data lake, which is a service that we offer to customers to upload all the logs and use our resources, all their resources through our technology to analyze and spot IoTs and do the proper threat hunting and stop attacks very early in the process, is critical to your ability to enable your business. And this is a key component of the zero trust design concept. I'll move now to look at the three core capabilities. Now we've spoken about the design concept. I'll speak about three core capabilities for zero trust network security. And I'll start with the context-based access. So whoever wants to get into the network, you need to make sure that this individual, once you put all the proper identity access management technologies that are needed to verify the individual, such as two-factor authentication, you need to give him a context-based access. You need to know who the individual is, what kind of policies he should be mapped to, and then give him so that he can get the access. You need also to make access safe. If you look at industry reports, especially as the workforce got more and more mobile, SASE technologies are significantly booming, because combining context-based access with secure access is a winning formula for any business to innovate and thrive in a world that could be compromised by a pandemic anytime. And unfortunately, if you look at a lot of the predictions that we see in the market today, the challenges that we've seen with COVID will not be unique. And while I hope the next challenge will be less fatal, but we have all to be prepared to a situation where even if a pandemic or a natural disaster doesn't and hopefully won't impact a lot of people, but it could impact the people's ability to do business in a normal manner. Third, and most importantly, as I said, consistent access and security available globally. I'm not at the liberty to discuss a lot of the things that Palo Alto is working on for obvious reasons, but the ability to ensure a consistent and secure end user experience to every user wherever he's working is paramount to the ability of companies to do business in the next 10 years. To give a user the same experience, the same access to his corporate resources, whether he's in the office, whether he's at work, whether he's in a cafe, is going to be more and more paramount. And I know there are a lot of technologies that today offer this, but there are certain shortcomings that make it complicated to scale, and also make it complicated to secure these users if they're not using their machines or their corporate provided machines. And these are things that Palo Alto is actively working to address, and you will see our technologies developing to enable more and more cloud transformation in the market for the industry overall. I'll go over the three concepts quickly in the following slide. So as I said, we need to provide context-based access, all users, all devices, and all applications, irrespective if the users are employees, partners, contractors, irrespective if the devices are corporate, or a home PC, or a BYOD. All applications, whether are enterprise, SaaS applications, or internet, we have to provide to our users context-based access. We need to secure all users' devices and applications against threats. That means protecting against exploits, against malware, against phishing, against data loss, malicious websites. We have to be able to implement policies that take into consideration user and device risk. We have to implement platforms that are able to consume behavioral indicators, work with work with hosts. Look how long, look how hosts, if and when hosts were compromised. Look at lateral movement in data centers. Look at malicious downloads. All of this need to be an integrated part of our access. This should be now, what you see in front of you should be the infrastructure, and connectivity should come as an afterthought. Otherwise, a business cannot scale in the current technology boom that we have. And every time we look at a certain technology or a certain capability that is delivered in the market, and we assume that we've reached a peak, a new technology immediately is introduced and introduces with it new vulnerabilities that the previous technology didn't show. Thus, I think it's very important that we consistently look at users' devices along with applications, because while we can control users and devices, applications will need platforms that are able to smartly learn about them, understand their patterns, and enforce the right policies that are tailored to those applications. In our platforms, you can build policies around applications, and there are thousands of applications that we automatically identify. But what we also do, we give our customers the ability to write custom signatures themselves, not to identify threats, but to identify applications, so that we provide context-based access and we look at threats, exploits, or malware within the applications that are being introduced into a network. And finally, we look at consistent access and security applied everywhere for everyone across all applications, no matter from which location anyone is connecting through. Our methodology for deploying the Zero Trust, and this will be the final part of my presentation. We have 5 things to look at, and I'll visualize this in an interesting slide after I mention the methodology itself. So first, we need to define the protect surface. We need to define what we are trying to protect. What are our most security assets? We need them to be able to map the transaction flows, to understand how our users behave, so that if there's a malicious behavior, we are able immediately to identify it. We need to build a baseline of how our transactions flow in the network, monitor them, baseline them, and then use that to help us identify if there is any malicious activity. After doing that, we have to architect a Zero Trust network, and I have a specific slide on that coming later. After putting the architecture using the certain technologies that we have to enable policies that assume no one is trusted. We create Zero Trust policies, and then we monitor and maintain what we have created. Let me show you how this methodology works in real life. Here you see, the parameter. Here you see a picture that is, taken for the previous U.S. President Barack Obama. The U.S. president is probably the most protected individual globally, and protecting critical data assets is not any different. And you should look at every piece of data you have as the most critical data in the world, because eventually it is your business. To start with, the green line that you see over here is the perimeter. It's the line of police enforcement along the street. Look at it. It's typically casual. These are, although they're very attentive individuals, but they're not the most trained and the most invested in people in the room or in the picture, right? We'll get to the most invested people, but these are standing along the side of the street and typically, looking at bystanders. If you look traditionally, when the perimeter was defined in a house, you could say, yes, for that I need a bunker. I need the perimeter to be the strongest thing I have. But when the data is mobile, when your assets are moving, the perimeter, while it is important, but it's not the most important way to protect your assets. So as we see, the perimeter is a little bit casual between brackets, and if you see the police officers, some of them have their hands in their pockets and they're looking at the asset. And by the way, this picture is from the first inauguration of President Obama. Now, if we move a little bit more, this is our protect surface. The protect surface is the thing you want to protect. In this graphic, it's the president, the first lady, and their two children in the armored limousine. This is the protect surface. This car is the most critical asset that you have. If you don't probably want the outstanding people to know, if possible, in which car of the three is the president, but as a security administrator, you need to know where your critical asset is. You need to completely understand the protect surface that you're looking at. After that, if you see these four men, these are the controls. You move your controls, they're smaller in magnitude, and typically they are around your attack surface. These service agents or these controls are closest to your protect surface. They are the most stringent, the most detailed, the most trained resources that you have. And typically you use them to protect your most valuable asset, which is in this case, the US president. What do these controls do? If you look, they create a microperimeter around the president. And the microperimeter acts as the first line of defense for the control, along with for the protect service, by utilizing the controls that are in place. So you create also a microperimeter around your protect service. And the additional controls that you have, if you look at the men circled in red, and the picture don't show them all, these are additional monitoring controls looking at all the malicious activity, not on and close to the protect surface, but all across your network in real time for any suspicious behavior for any suspicious activity or changes in behaviors in the environment. The men with the red circles who are monitoring, if they see a guy on the side with his hands in his pocket, but suddenly he's pulling his hand out of the pocket, they are trained to immediately tackle that individual because a change in behavior could indicate an attack. And therefore, they are as important to the security of your protect surface as everyone else is. They complement that and they do it differently. They look at it from a different perspective. So this should visualize how you should approach your zero trust philosophy when looking at your network. When this graph shows, this is a typical graph around the criticality of your protect service and your time on zero trust journey. When you start your zero trust journey, start with something less critical that you can learn and build. This is important for you. So this is the first part of the curve, is you're learning and you're practicing. As you get more comfortable with the methodology, you should broaden your protect service to include more and more critical elements, and protect your most valuable assets. After that, you should focus on creating secondary and tertiary product surfaces to expand the learning and the practice that you have learned to protect your most critical assets, to protect all the assets that you have in your network. The goal is to eventually have a security approach that enables your business. You need a security approach that's simple to deploy everywhere, that allows for consistent policy enforcement, and that offers you or gives you complete prevention across your attack life circle. You need to untrust anyone, even if he's the company's owner. He should not be trusted, because you never know who compromised his machine. So access should be defined on business outcomes. It should be context-based, and it should be dynamic. The policies that you deploy should not be static. The policies that you deploy should not depend on a human to go and change them when an attack is detected on the network. They should be dynamic. The machine learning capabilities that you have on your network should be able to automatically trigger the right safeguards that you need in place if an attack is suspected. You should be able to implement the dynamic policy that you need. To give you an example, in our platform, if a malicious activity is detected in a downloaded file, what happens is a trigger is initiated across your platform. A firewall policy is automatically installed to protect your network or your users or anyone who's trying to access a certain asset against the malware or the vulnerability that has just been identified. So this is something that's critical to your operation, because, as I said, depending on human factor will not ensure protection at the right time every time that this is needed. In this slide, what I want to quickly share with you is how our product portfolio maps against a zero trust architecture. You know, over here we've spoken about 5 things. So defining the protect surface, looking at the transaction flows, architecting a zero trust network, creating a zero trust policy, and then monitor and maintain. In front of you, you see the complete Palo Alto platform, whether it's our core firewalls, our subscription services, our XDR capabilities, our SASE solutions, our XSOAR playbooks, our container security capabilities, and our transformation services. And you can see where each one of these products and solutions fit into the zero trust architecture, and why we believe that you cannot have a full protection with one of the products. You have to look at security as a complete architecture that is interconnected, that's automated, and that allows you to consistently implement your policies all across your network. And keep in mind that, from a zero trust perspective, Palo Alto doesn't offer everything. And at no point do we claim that we're the only company who approaches this. I mean, John's paper is public knowledge. And as I said, zero trust is a buzzword. Every other company in the market is working on implementing zero trust. I think the major difference that we have as a company is that when John was on board, we were a company with a single product. We had only our firewalls with three, probably 4 subscription services. As John came on board and worked with our CTO office, we brought in products without any legacy of protecting an existing market share, and developed the technology and the platform from the ground up. And most of the technologies and the companies that Palo Alto acquired were companies acquired for IP purposes. We wanted intellectual property. We wanted to deploy more and more capabilities across our platform under the zero architecture umbrella without having to worry about existing customer bases for the companies that we acquire. I've been in companies throughout my career where, you know, you acquire from a technology perspective a very good company, but then you get into a clash where how can you push a certain technology on the company, on the existing customers of the company you acquired without opening the door for competition? And I'll give you an example. Many vendors used to deploy firewalls as blades on switches, and they kept pushing for this architecture, although they knew it doesn't completely serve the best interest of customers. It partially does, but then telling customers remove the firewall blades from a switch and deploy them somewhere else in your network as sensors means that a certain vendor will have to compete with all the vendors that offer sensors. While if you're looking at a switch with a blade, no one can compete with this vendor. So it's very important to keep this in mind. We don't have legacy. We don't have an existing conflicts with our customer bases. We design our technology solutions from starting with the inside, starting with the core platform, which is our firewalls, which is our sensors, and we grow with our technology to protect the full network.